Welcome back to Overcome Babylon. I'm your host, Abraham Ojeda. I'm coming to you almost every single week on a mission to help you understand the 70 weeks or 70 Shavua of Daniel prophecy, and also help you get ready as we count down the days towards the abomination of desolation. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at that countdown, please. Let's pull it up. We are approximately 400 days. 400 days away from the abomination that makes desolate, the Shakutz Shamem. We've looked at this in great detail already on episodes 2 through 7 of the podcast. Yeshua told us that this period of time, immediately after the tribulation, the desolation of this time period that we're entering, the abomination of desolation, immediately after that, the sun would be darkened, the moon will not give its light, and it's going to be unprecedented, unlike anything that has happened since the creation of the earth until now. Whew, if that doesn't rattle you, and if that doesn't wake you up, I don't know what will, but certainly check out what I'm saying, fact check it, study it for yourself. Download the presentation so you can do it for free at overcomebabylon.com. Take a look at it for yourself, study it, and I know that you'll be tremendously blessed in the understanding of the 120 revolutions of time and the 49, the Shabua being a 49-year period throughout the entire history of mankind. So, today we're going to be talking about something that is quite popular these days, cannabis, and really all psychoactive drugs. So really this episode is not just, even though, yes, marijuana, cannabis is going to be the main focus, really we're going to be talking about all psychoactive drugs because they all have the same spiritual implications, believe it or not. So I'm going to be going into some stuff that you probably have not heard too many people talk about with the kind of background that I bring to the table here, having firsthand experience with cannabis. Okay, so I'm talking about the cannabis deception today, and why I'm calling it a deception you are about to find out. And this is really part 2 of demon possession. I did an episode on the very first episode of the podcast. It was about demon possession. This information that I'm about to share with you ties directly into that. But before we get into that, I just want us to focus on some verses today, because some people I know, hopefully it's not you, but I know people are going to say, why are you talking about drugs, man? Why is this important? Why are we focusing on this? Why aren't we studying, this part of the Bible or this, or why are you focusing on this today? Well, it's quite simple. There's a verse here in Ephesians 5:11 that specifically Paul is telling us, have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather expose them. For it is shameful even to speak of those things which are done by them in secret, but all things that are exposed are made manifest by the light, for whatever makes manifest is light. So my goal today is to be like a flashlight that you shine in a dark room. Let's just say it's a rundown apartment and you just see the cockroaches running around, okay? This is going to be the light that exposes the darkness that most people are absolutely, completely not even aware of. And when we're talking about psychoactive drugs and heavy drugs, or even just the gateway drugs or things that appear to be innocent, I'm going to be talking about it pretty much all today. And you're going to want to stay tuned to this from start to finish. So the question is, do you and I, as followers of Yeshua, believers in the Bible, do we partake or not? Do we or do we not partake? Here's what I'll say. This is coming from firsthand experience, and quite frankly, if I didn't experience this, I probably wouldn't be able to share with just the precision, the accuracy that I'm about to share this message with you today. If I didn't go through what I went through, I probably wouldn't be making such a big deal about this, but I have been put through some very unique situations in my life by the Father in heaven. Jehovah has brought me through some extreme circumstances to deliver this message today. And I know, it's a fact, I know you're going to be blessed by this information, because remember what I said in episode 1. Let's just go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and play a little clip here from episode 1. But before I do, I talk about how I was released from demon possession, okay? But you have to understand my background, which I'll emphasize to you right now, that I was never taught in the church circles that I was in, whether I was even in a Pentecostal church or, Calvary Chapel Evangelical Camp or Baptist, Southern Baptist, Independent Fundamental Southern Baptist, excuse me. I was in all of these circles, and none of them talked about the power of Yeshua in terms of being released from demonic oppression, demonic chains, strongholds, being oppressed, having haunted homes, dwellings, cars, you name it. Nobody taught me about this. And so let me just play the clip, and then I'll go ahead and I'll mention some things. Well, let's go ahead and go back to episode 1 of the podcast, where I talk about being released from demonic oppression. Out of all those years, like 12 years at that point, yeah, I was like 12, 13 something years, like of being in churches, I was thinking to myself in this very moment, this morning on November 2019, is there something that I wasn't taught? Is there something that all these churches missed? Is there something that was not brought to my attention, that no one ever noticed, that no one ever cared about, no one ever bothered to really think about and consider? Is there something inside of me, Father, that is not pleasing to you? If there's a demon, if it is a demon or unclean spirit, I cast it out in the name of Yeshua right now. And I was never taught to pray like that. I promise you. I was never taught to pray like that. Ever. I know some church circles, like that's kind of normal. For me, it wasn't. That's something that I don't know how to explain it. I was like told to, and I did it right then and there, like within a split second, and I did. And I was like 5 seconds after I prayed that, I was like sitting there. I was like, what did I just pray? Like, that's kind of weird, man. Like, no one's ever, that's just weird. Like, did I just pray that? Like, I was kind of questioning whether or not I even prayed it. And all of a sudden, I literally felt a vibration in my chest, like a warm vibration and energy. And it started vibrating and vibrating. And it went up through my neck, and I'm like, oh my God. And it went up to my face, and it vibrated in my ears, and my eyes rolled back in my head, and I felt like a little sick. Like I felt physically ill, like I wanted to throw up. And then just for a split second, all of a sudden something came out of my head. There's an energy that left my head. And I didn't even know what to think about it. I was like, what the heck was that? What? I was like, what? And I started praying. I was like, Father, was that you? What? And he's like, no. What did you just pray? And I was like, oh my gosh. It was a demon. I was demon possessed. Okay, so did you catch that? I was set free, and I was never taught to pray like that. Nobody taught me to pray and say, I cast you out in the name of Yeshua. No one ever taught me to pray like that. No one ever taught me that you can have authority and power over demons and the demonic in the name of Yeshua and his power and his blood. No one taught me that. So when I prayed that for the first time, it was just incredible what I experienced, and I felt something leave my body. Now, that was back in November 2019, so just a few months before COVID. Here's what happened. I haven't shared this. I don't think I've shared this with too many people, but I felt like this was just something that I really needed to share for the podcast here. This is not something that I'm extremely proud of, obviously. When I look back, there's a lot of shame and regret and embarrassment over what I'm about to share with you. But it was about a month later, so December timeframe of 2019. 2019 was a big year for me, in case you haven't realized that. But 2019 December, I remember I had gotten some firewood from some neighbors. I purchased it. I bought, I don't know how many cords. It was quite a bit. Already chopped, split. I ordered firewood from them, and these neighbors of mine, they were pot growers. Okay, so obviously being in Colorado, pot has been a thing for a while, and you know, it's become a very popular thing. Marijuana is pretty much ubiquitous. It's everywhere. People are always talking about it. People do it. It's just not a big deal. No one really even thinks about it too much these days, of whether or not it's bad or not. It's just kind of a cultural norm. So, back then, in December, I had these neighbors. They delivered my firewood, and he was like, "Hey, you want some chocolates? You want some?" And he gave me some nuggets of marijuana as well. Hey, you want some chocolates? You want some weed? We grow it. We process it and we sell it and stuff like that. I was like, at that point in my life, I had been a seller actually of CBD, hemp bombs and creams and stuff like that, and even ingestible stuff. And so I was very familiar with hemp, industrial hemp, which is totally different from marijuana. Industrial hemp has very little THC. I think it's like 0.03 below that. It's not even, it's a fraction of a percentage, exponentially nothing compared to marijuana. So it's two different things we're talking about here. If you're not totally familiar with marijuana and hemp, but hemp is totally different. And so back then I was like, I had been enjoying hemp. I was taking kind of like tinctures of hemp. That's the main thing I would use, and it made me feel good, I guess. I did notice a tremendous difference, even though I was a seller. I was very excited about hemp being legal because of all the benefits I read about online, the endocannabinoid system, and all these little things, right? But it's supposed to be good for pain. So I was like, hey, well, if hemp that I've been using for a while isn't that bad, I've been enjoying it, I haven't tried it since I was a young teenager. This is what I was thinking at the time. Let me just go ahead and give it another shot. I'm getting it for free. My gosh, this would be like hundreds of dollars worth of product. He gave me a couple bags of things. And so that was my rationale. Hey, it's expensive. I'm getting it for free. It's probably not that bad, right? Well, so I remember it. It was a Friday night, right? I remember it very clearly. I had just finished doing a ton of tile in my house because I was building my house at the time, and I did like hundreds of pounds of tile for a wall and for a fireplace. I had really worked myself pretty good. My back was hurting like crazy. And I was sitting at my kitchen island with a couple of bar stools there. My wife was hanging out with me as well. And, I just to be able to kind of function and enjoy Shabbat because it was Friday night, like I mentioned, I kind of just got a cup of coffee ready, and then Neil's like, you know what? Now's a good time to try those chocolates. Let's go ahead and give it a shot. And so they're about the size of a silver dollar. So I took a little piece. I went ahead and took it. Just honestly, like maybe an eighth of it, not a quarter. That would have been too big. Probably an eighth of it. Just a really small piece because I know, like with THC, I just wanted to see if I can moderate it. Well, so I took this eighth of a piece of the chocolate, and I'm sitting there. I'm just winding down. Again, I did it for back pain because my back was killing me from doing a bunch of tile. And what's really weird is I started feeling kind of different. Now, keep in mind, I was newly just experiencing the power of God in my life in a huge way. What I had just described in episode 1 of the podcast had just happened no more than a couple weeks before that, maybe 3 weeks before that particular day. And so I'm sitting here at the bar stool on my kitchen island, and at first I feel kind of like something's kind of not feeling right. Like I start feeling a little bit of paranoia and anxiety. This happens a lot with people that do marijuana, by the way. I've heard it so many times. People say, "Oh, I had a bad trip." But I've experienced it. Like, you just start feeling kind of paranoid and anxious for whatever reason. So I was sitting there, and that's exactly what was happening to me. I was like, oh man. And then I was holding the cup of coffee. I had my laptop open. I was just kind of looking at the internet, doing some stuff, just trying to wind down for Shabbat, for Sabbath. And all of a sudden, I lose control of my wrist. Okay, it goes limp, and the coffee spills on my laptop. I don't know how to explain it to you. I just lost control of my wrist. Like, that doesn't happen to me. Like, yeah, I was tired, but I don't lose control of my hands. Like, I have good grip on things. And so that was really the first red flag. And I was like, oh man, crap. And I'm panicking. I'm trying to dry off my laptop. I went to go basically put it underneath some towels in my bedroom, and I flip it over, hoping that it would dry out. I checked the next day. It was totally done. It wouldn't even turn on. Totally destroyed. Okay, my laptop was destroyed after I took this chocolate. That's the first problem. But it gets worse than that. I mean, if that weren't bad enough, I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh my gosh. I was very devastated over my laptop. I was using that for work. I was using it for a lot of things, and so I was devastated. I was very devastated. And I remember my wife saying, "Don't worry, we could buy another one." But I had put a lot of upgrades and stuff, so it was just a huge loss for me. But I'm sitting there and I'm like, "Oh my gosh!" And all of a sudden, literally everything that I described in episode 1, as far as the sequence of events of something leaving my body through my head, the exact opposite of that happened. I'm sitting there on the bar stool, bumped up to my kitchen island with my elbows on the table, just sitting there, trying to catch my breath after freaking out that my laptop had coffee all over it. And all of a sudden, I feel something entering through my head. There's the vibration in my eyes and my ears. I literally feel my eyes roll in the back of my head a little bit. It goes into my soul. I literally felt it go into my heart, into the heart area of my chest, and I knew that there was something that literally just entered my body. And it's creepy. It's weird because, you look at like famous celebrities, like, I'm trying to think, Rihanna, or like all these different celebrities, Eminem, they talk about how they have spirits and demons inside of them. And I'm like, oh my gosh, man. Like, I know exactly what they're talking about because I felt that when I did drugs, when I did marijuana. And when I was sitting there, this just happened, and I was sitting there like, oh my gosh, no way. I was totally speechless. I didn't even know what to say. I was conscious of what happened. I was kind of losing control of the room. Everything gets kind of glitchy. You kind of don't have full awareness situationally of everything. You become kind of numb under marijuana, even a small dose like that. And so I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh my gosh, did that really just happen? Should I tell my wife? No, don't tell her, it's embarrassing. Should I cast it out right now? I don't know. I feel like I'm still high. I'm under the influence. I really don't know what I should do. I think I'm powerless. All these thoughts go through my head. And here's the sad thing, okay? It really comes down to a pride issue. I let my pride get in the way. And instead of dealing with this thing right then and there, literally, I let about 2 weeks go by, and I noticed the anger came back. I was starting to become a mean person, bitter. I noticed, what else did I notice? I noticed I was having really demonic dreams tormenting me, sleep paralysis. I was noticing a lot of things. I could go into a lot more details, but I started noticing that I was being affected by the thing that had entered my body. So 2 weeks went by, and I told my wife, this is what happened, right? And so, long story short, we go through a very similar prayer as to what I prayed in episode 1. We cast it out in the name of Yeshua right now. We said that prayer over a few times over and over again until the thing was totally gone. I had a bucket in front of me. I was puking, dry heaving a lot, actually. And I felt my eyes roll in the back of my head, and that was that, okay? So that is my experience with marijuana after not having done it since I was a teenager, becoming a believer, being set free very clearly. It was a revelation from Jesus, from Yeshua. that I had something inside of my body. He released it in November 2019. About a month later, here we go. I do something that allows the spirit to come back in. Whether it was the same spirit, I don't know. Whether it was one or more than one, certainly it was one, but if it was more than one, a familiar spirit, I have no clue. All I can tell you is that something came back in and it's starting messing with my life again. Okay? So, if that doesn't answer the question, do we partake or not? I'm about to give you some more evidence, some more details, some more just nitty gritty, just in your face proof that this is something that is making God's people stumble into iniquity. I'm telling you, this is totally evil, totally satanic. And my job is to expose these works of darkness, have absolutely no fellowship with them, but be like a light that shines right on them and tells it how it is. Because look what's going on in our country. By the way, if you want to check out the blog, I posted a blog about this whole topic. Feel free to read about it, but I'm basically reiterating a lot of the stuff in there. But if you go to flowhub.com, cannabis industry statistics for 2022. So how is the industry performing? Where is it heading? Let me just read to you the key findings of this research. 50% of cannabis users have increased their consumption since the pandemic. Cannabis sales to female customers have increased by 55%. Weed sales reached $25 billion in 2021. And 44% of Americans now have access to legal recreational cannabis. 91% of adults want to legalize weed. Mergers and acquisitions nearly doubled from 2020 to 2021. And the cannabis industry now supports 500,000 jobs, just about 500,000 jobs, 428,000 jobs. Here's what I'll say. Look, marijuana has been kind of legal. Obviously, there's always been a black market, but it's been very legal and available since 2014 in Colorado. Let's just take a look at some of the trends here. Okay? This article here, this is a medical study, a medical journal. Psychiatry is the name of the medical journal, okay? This is an original investigation, June 22nd, 2021. Okay? Associations of suicidality, or how do you say that? Suicidality trends with cannabis use as a function of sex and depression status. So the question, are there associations between cannabis use and suicidality trends in young adults? And do they vary as a function of sex and depression? So the findings, okay, this is really big. This is really big. This survey study examined 281,650 adult participants excuse me, in the 2008-2019 national surveys of drug use and health data, and found associations of past year cannabis use disorder, daily cannabis use, and non-daily cannabis use with higher prevalence. Let me repeat that. Higher prevalence of past year suicidal ideation. That means suicidal ideation means you're thinking about suicide. It's in your thoughts. It's in your mind. Plan of suicide and attempted suicide in both sexes, but significantly more in women. All right, ladies, so you got to watch out, especially, right? But in this study, cannabis use was associated with a higher prevalence of suicidal ideation, plan, and attempt among U.S. young adults with or without depression, and the risks were greater for women than men. You can read this for yourself. It's on JAMAnetwork.com. But if you just search for associations of suicidality trends with cannabis use as a function of sex and depression status in psychiatry, though it's a mouthful, you can just go to that website there. Okay? But let's look at another one I have for you. Where is it? Okay, so that's an older article. Let's look at some newer research. This one's from the NIH. It's on the NIH, but it's general psychiatry. This is, buddy. I think that was the new article. Yeah, 2021. This one's very similar, though. This was in August 26, 2021. Article, yes. Marijuana use and suicidal behaviors among school-going adolescents in Africa. Assessments of prevalence and risk factors from the Global School-Based Student Health Survey. So this is Africa. The other one was, where was this? Let me just see. I forgot where it was. I believe it is in the United States, this one. Yeah. So 15 states and Washington, D.C. I believe this is an American study. I don't have time right now because I don't want to slow down on this whole presentation. But U.S., it's saying U.S. civilian. I'm not sure if other countries were involved. It looks like it was just the U.S. for this really big 200,000 person study. Almost 300,000. But this one right here, general psychiatry, this one was in Africa. And what they found, let's just look at the results. The conclusions. Marijuana use was significantly associated with suicidal behaviors, suicidal ideation, planning, and repeated attempted suicide among the students. So that is the basically bottom line. If you want to read about this article again, you can go to NIH, or it's ncbi.nlm.nih.gov. Read about it, okay? So why am I pointing out these two scientific articles about suicide? Because this is the kind of thing that marijuana does to people. It actually makes you depressed. It is a depression drug. I had a friend, high school, we went to middle school, high school together. I won't mention his name just for sake of privacy of his family and so forth, but we were buddies. We hung out. We had a band together in high school. He was really a cool guy in a lot of ways, but he ended up getting involved with the pot industry in Nevada, and he became very involved with it. He became like a marketing guy. He went back and forth between Vegas and Reno, Nevada. Long story short, he committed suicide, and he was big into weed, big into marijuana. He committed suicide. Okay, so not only has marijuana use gone through the roof, but now we're finally getting the evidence. We're finally getting the facts on the table. It leads to depression. It leads to suicidal thoughts, suicidal tendencies, and suicide itself. From my own personal experience, I have witnessed this. It's not a conspiracy fiction. It's a conspiracy fact. Marijuana is absolutely detrimental for the vast majority of people that use it, especially young people, which is who is mostly targeted by the marijuana culture, of hip hop. And just when people talk about weed, it's always younger people that get sucked into this culture. And so what I really want to focus on next is, how do we get to this point in history? How is it that we have gone from being in the West, in the United States specifically, this Judeo-Christian, constitutional republic with values and ethics? At one point in the United States, there was an amendment to the Constitution to prohibit the sale and use of alcohol. Now, it didn't last very long because people needed their alcohol, right? But there was the abolition of alcohol in the United States. People forget that this was a real deal thing. This really actually happened. And now, just a few, less than 100 years later from then, because that was in the early 1900s, but a few years later, here we go. We are using psychedelic drugs, and we're calling it, trendy, and we're calling it legal, and we're calling it lawful. But so where did this all begin? And so what I'm going to show you right now is a video clip of the father of modern Satanism, Aleister Crowley. Now, if you talk to a Wiccan, a New Age pagan, or a Satanist, most of them don't really know, or it's not that they don't necessarily know, but they won't give a whole lot of credit to Aleister Crowley. Most people that I know, they don't really know who he is, even though he is the foundation. Make no mistake, the Book of the Law, his religion called Telema, everything that he put together is the foundation for all of the Hollywood pedophile cults, all of just the garbage in the music industry, everything evil as far as modern pop culture and satanic worship is concerned, and the politics all the way down to Hollywood and the music industry. Aleister Crowley is the guy, man. But not only that, watch this video. I'm going to play a clip here. He one of his ways of bringing in the new age of Lucifer and satanic worship was to use the drug movement and bring about a drug revolution. Crowley himself was an Englishman, but he absolutely infiltrated and took over United States culture as well. And so just check out what Good Fight Ministries has to say about Aleister Crowley. I think this is going to be a huge eye-opener for you.
Few people realize that Aleister Crowley is not only the father of modern Satanism, but the father of modern culture as well. Crowley, whose house overlooked Loch Ness and was bought by guitarist Jimmy Page, has for good reason also been called the other Loch Ness Monster. Crowley, who in his book Magic had admitted to sacrificing hundreds of children to Satan, was run out of Italy and called by the press of his day the wickedest man on earth. Crowley claimed that a demonic spirit he later identified as Satan himself dictated a book to him in 1904 called the Book of the Law. Under the heading The Law of Thelema, the Book of the Law declares, "This book lays down a simple code of conduct. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is a law, love under will. There is no law beyond do what thou wilt." Echoing Satan's arrogant boast, "I will exalt my throne above the stars of God," the book centers around the imposition of satanic self-will in defiance of divine will. Aleister Crowley, elaborating on the satanic doctrine of do what thou wilt, declared, quote, "I say today, to hell with Christianity. I will build me a new heaven and a new earth. I want blasphemy, murder, rape, revolution, anything bad, etc." Aleister Crowley has been called the unsung hero of the 1960s and the father of the New Age movement. Time magazine, on their front page article on the New Age movement, declares that they don't know where the term came from or where the movement is going. But the evidence is all so clear for those who have eyes to see and ears to hear. In Crowley's book, The Book of the Law, the spirit of Satan who channeled through him wrote of the coming of the new eon, a transliteration of the Greek word ionis for age. The book declares how this new eon of Horus will develop, how the child will grow up. These are for us to determine, growing up ourselves in the way of the law of Thelema under the enlightened guidance of the Master Therion. And just who is the Master Therion that is to guide the new age? At the end of the book, we discover that Therion equals 666, the number of the Antichrist, the one whom the Bible calls the man of lawlessness, the man of sin, who is to reign during the last period of history, in the tribulation period. A large part of Satan's plan through Crowley was to bring in a drug revolution and to open up the masses to the demonic spirit world. Crowley's former disciple and secretary, Israel Regardie, stated, quote, "Crowley became an expert at a dozen or so varieties of Hindu and Buddhist yoga. He experimented with more drugs more frequently than anybody in the West before the neurological revolution of the 1960s. In the Book of the Law, the satanic spirit that channeled through Aleister Crowley merely echoes the satanic strains from the Garden of Eden so many years ago. He states, quote, "I am the snake that giveth knowledge and delight and bright glory and stir the hearts of men with drunkenness to worship me, take wine and strange drugs." Crowley interpreted this in his book Diary of a Drug Fiend to mean, quote, "Things like heroin and alcohol may be and should be used for the purpose of worshiping, that is, entering into communion with the snake that giveth knowledge and delight and bright glory." Aleister Crowley's twisted poetry glorified drugs as a door to the demonic. He wrote, quote, "Stab your demoniac smile to my brain, soak me in cognac, love and cocaine, heart on my heart, come out of the rain, let's have another go of cocaine, always go on till you have to stop, let's have another sniff over the top." Robert Anton Wilson, who played a leading role in the counterculture revolution of the 1960s, stated in his book, Sex and Drugs, quote, "Crowley played a decided role in developing the philosophy or mystique of the drug revolution."
All right, so I have it on screen right here. The Book of the Law. This was Aleister Crowley's it's the most quoted, the most pervasive, the most influential work of all satanic magic, thought, and philosophy that there is. And what it really comes down to is do whatever you want as long as you love whatever that means. It's your definition of love. So if you're a pedophile and you think that, loving little kids is yeah, you want to do what you want, it's love, it's all good. Anything goes as long as you love, but that's the pseudo science of it. Because everybody has a different definition of love, especially when you're totally jacked, whacked out of your mind with drugs. which is something that Aleister Crowley was obsessed with. And before I get to that, I remember how I mentioned that Aleister Crowley has infiltrated all of modern Hollywood and the music industry. This is actually the cover of a Christian band, so-called Christian band called Emery, 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 and it's directly, I mean, this is the album cover, and they say, "We do what we want." I mean, that's just how it's been, man. Crowley took over and infiltrated. His teachings totally annihilated the West from a moral decay standpoint. So what I'm going to show you now is his book, Diary of a Drug Fiend. Now, if you just look at the cover, it looks really weird. There's like smoke everywhere. It's probably some kind of ritual, but there's like, it looks like almost a dead person, or at least somebody that's passed out. Their arm is over here, their head is over here, but you can see like their shoe and their leg is sticking out. And so there's like it looks like a hookah or some kind of Middle Eastern, apparatus for smoking. And so Diary of a Drug Fiend is, you heard it quoted in that video I just played. I'm going to show you that actual same quote in more detail. But you might be asking yourself, why do you have the book of a Satanist? Why are you looking at this stuff? Well, remember, we're supposed to expose the works of darkness, but have no fellowship with them. Oftentimes people are like, "Oh, well, I don't think marijuana is bad, or I don't think this is bad, or this or that." Sometimes, if you want to get down to the bottom of something, you really have to dig deep, and you have to go all the way to the teachings of the actual people pushing the agenda. In this case, if you want to know what is evil, without a shadow of a doubt, you have to actually go and look at the teachings of the Satanist himself. And you'll know. Whatever they're teaching, do the opposite, pretty much. So if you want to know if something's evil or not, sometimes the true test is what is being taught by the enemy. So let me go skip all the way to page, and this is going to be page 364. And so what Diary of a Drug Fiend is, it's just a ton of him, like Aleister Crowley doing drugs, like a lot of drugs, and he just writes down all his experiences psychedelically. He literally just sits there and writes down all of his experiences. And he talks about all these apparitions, these spirits, these demons, all these things, and he talks to them. He writes down what they say, and it's disgusting, and it's an abomination. And it's something that I'm not even reading. I'm not going to spend time reading all this crap. But here's what I want to focus on, okay? This is from page 364. He says, "Let's get back to the words, to worship me." Okay, so this is at the very end of the book, and he's kind of summarizing everything that he's kind of talked about in this huge buffet of garbage and demonic witchcraft experiences and garbage, okay? At the very end of the book, he says, "Let's get back to the words, to worship me." And he says, "They mean that things like heroin and alcohol may and should be used for the purpose of worshiping, that is, entering into communion with the snake that giveth knowledge and delight and bright glory, which is the genius which lies in the core of every star. And every man and every woman is a star. The taking of a drug should be a carefully thought out and purposeful religious act." So did you catch what he's saying here? Things like heroin and alcohol should be used for the purpose of worshiping and entering into communion with the snake, the devil. But you know what he kind of misses? He doesn't say it the way it should be, is that it's not just entering into communion with the snake, but it's entering into communion with the demons that will enter your body and torment you and keep you from living your God-given purpose in this life. That is exactly what he's talking about there. And he admits it. Now, let's talk about it. Is alcohol evil? I talk to Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses, Seventh-day Adventists. I talk to all kinds of people, and they're like, alcohol is totally evil. Or don't forget, Yeshua turned water into wine at the wedding in Cana, right? So is alcohol evil? But it is in fact drunkenness and losing control of your body that's evil, right? Heroin, you can't just have like LSD, heroin, DMT, dimethyl, whatever. I forget the name of it. Marijuana, heroin, all these drugs, cocaine. You can't just have a little dose and be okay. You'll lose control of your body. That's the biggest difference between alcohol and maybe tobacco, which I enjoy on occasion, alcohol anyway. I'll enjoy a little bit on occasion, have a little drink. But it's the drunkenness, it's the losing control of your body that enters you into communion with the snake. That's exactly what happened with me when I took a little chocolate, not understanding what was about to happen inside of my body. I would have never touched it if I would have known, man. So, let's take a look at one of the modern disciples of Aleister Crowley. One of the biggest disciples. He doesn't even know he's a disciple of Aleister Crowley, but he is absolutely, man. He is so hooked on weed. He is so hooked. Joe Rogan is got a huge platform. This video itself, it's got 1.2 million views. And it's just him smoking weed with Elon Musk. The original podcast itself with Elon Musk, the full interview, that's got millions of views.
Okay.
But the problem with Joe is that all of the younger generation, the martial arts crowd, he's got so much influence. So many people look up to Joe Rogan. I have even enjoyed Joe Rogan's podcast tremendously in the past.
First turned on to it by Charlie Murphy and then reignited by Dave Chappelle.
You have to understand how influential Joe Rogan is. Anyways, let's just take a look a little bit at what Joe is talking about when he talks about marijuana use on his show. But also, by the way, he has the biggest podcast, if I'm not mistaken. He has the biggest podcast on the internet. Okay, so Joe Rogan is not. He's not just a nobody. So let's see what one of Aleister Crowley's disciples is teaching. And I want to direct your attention to this interview that he did with Ben Shapiro. Now, why did this interview catch my eye so much? Because Ben Shapiro is an Orthodox Jew, actually. I don't know. Well, he grew up as an Orthodox Jew. I don't know if he's Reformed now. I don't follow him too much. I just know about him. He does conservative political commentary, which I find pretty interesting sometimes. But Ben Shapiro is an attorney. He's a podcaster. Like I said, he has his own show. And he wears the goofy, sorry, I don't mean to make fun of you guys in the audience, but he even says it himself, I wear a goofy hat, okay? So I'm not making fun of him. If you want to wear the Orthodox Jewish hat, I think that's cool. I don't totally understand why people do that, but anyways, he does it. And so he comes on Joe Rogan's show, and Joe Rogan wants to debate him about marijuana use. Now, this video itself, this is just a clip. It's not the entire interview with Ben Shapiro. Okay? This video clip itself has 7 million views. Almost 7.5 million views. So, again, it just shows you this platform that Joe Rogan has is just so influential. And I want you to see what Joe is teaching people. I want you to see how marijuana is being portrayed. And I want you to, I'm going to make some commentary here afterwards, but I really want you to understand why this is so dangerous. So just check out this clip.
I don't want to let this marijuana thing go just yet. One of the things that I wanted to bring up to you was this idea that if you're a religious person, don't you think that there's certain things that maybe God put here for us to consume, to change your perspective, to allow you to reach new levels of consciousness? Don't you think it's entirely possible that some of these things that are here, and I know you haven't experienced them, but they might literally have been put there by God? And there's some evidence to say that a lot of the text from the Bible, that in particular there was, I think it was the University of Tel Aviv, somewhere in Jerusalem, where these scholars were trying to decipher what it meant when Moses encountered the burning bush.
Right.
And they believe that it may have been the acacia tree, which is very rich in dimethyltryptamine, which is a psychedelic substance that the brain produces, and it's very common in plants. And they think that this might have been when he met God and God was a burning bush, that this might have been some crude translation of them being involved in some sort of a psychedelic experience. Now, it sounds outlandish unless you've had that psychedelic experience. And when you have, you very well could think that you were in a conversation with God. This is on Earth. And this is something that may very well have been lost information, or this may very well have been rituals that people participated in to bring them closer together and to reinforce that sense of community that you do get from a church and you do get from a group of people that share moral beliefs and values. And there's real good discussion that a lot of these experiences that became these religious doctrines came from psychedelic experiences.
Okay, let's just pause him there for a second, because he's throwing two things at us in rapid fire succession. Number one, does God put things on earth? I mean, if it's here on earth, then it must be good, right? So with that logic, I should go out and eat rocks and use poison ivy for toilet paper. And God, I mean, what else, right? There's a lot of things that are harmful in nature. Use cactus to rub on your body because it's supposed to be good for lotion. I don't know. Just something ridiculous. Just because God put something here on earth, like a poisonous mushroom, doesn't mean that it's good to eat, right? So that's a very flawed sort of thinking, but it's very common with the Rastafarians that promote and advocate for every herb being created in Genesis, and they use that to say that marijuana should be used. It's something that should be enjoyed. But then Rogan goes on to say that God is not real. Moses had a psychedelic experience with DMT and hallucinated. He had a hallucinogenic experience where he thought he was speaking with God. So blasphemous, man. So ridiculous. What Joe is saying is God is not real. God is a psychedelic experience. You should all have psychedelic experiences. That's what he's pushing. Let's see how Ben Shapiro responds to it, though, and I think you're going to be totally baffled at how he responds to this.
Now, as someone who's never experienced that before, I know this is probably a very strange thing to try to even wrap your head around. It is entirely alien until you experience it, but it might very well be religious.
I mean, I've heard that from other people who've used those kinds of drugs. I mean, Sam actually made this argument to me too about the use of psychedelics, and I mean, maybe. I mean,
God made apples.
Well, okay, so this argument, I will say, I'm not.
Oh my gosh, man! I gotta pause him there. Maybe. Are you freaking kidding me, man? So ridiculous. So ridiculous. This video alone has 7 million views. I think the original interview has like 10 million. So ridiculous. So spineless. Coward. Can't get on that show and say, God is real. Moses did not have a psychedelic experience, but with whatever fake, made-up, blasphemous story of acacia trees burning with, and they contain so much DMT that he just started tripping like he was on LSD or acid, mushrooms, I mean. Like something ridiculous, like he just took a drug and that's why he saw God. Like, this should piss you off, man. This should make your blood boil. How ridiculous Ben Shapiro's response is when he says maybe. Just unbelievable. How spineless, how weak and pathetic people of faith have become when they're put on the hot seat and it's time to shine, baby. So ridiculous, man. Let's just keep listening and see what else Ben has to say.
Not super fond of the argument that God made something and therefore it's ours to use or I mean, like, I keep kosher, right? Like, God made pigs, I don't eat them. So, so I am not a huge fan of the argument that because something is here or because an urge is natural, therefore we ought to imbibe or therefore we ought to participate in a particular activity. One of the things that I'm very big on, I'm a rationalist when it comes to religion, as much as you can be a rationalist with regard to religion, to the extent that I think that it's up to us to use our reasonable faculties to determine the proper use of things. So, which is why you shouldn't overuse drugs, even if you're going to use drugs, for example.
This is part of the problem of making things illegal. You make things illegal, then you really don't know what it is or how it affects the body or what's the right dose or the wrong dose. And then people get involved in these terrible situations where they're taking things and they're just guessing what it is.
There's truth to that, but it's also true that on a social level, I'm not talking about legal because we totally agree on the legal level. On the social level, there's a couple of things that are true of, for example, the Orthodox Jewish community. Low rates of addiction because people have that social fabric. They don't feel the necessity. Also, as you say, substance use in moderation can actually be quite a good thing. So low rates of alcoholism in the Jewish community, and part of that is the fact that you are given Kiddush wine from the time you're a kid, right? I mean, you actually are...
It's destigmatized.
Yeah, it's destigmatized. And the idea is that in its proper context, this could be a good thing.
Right.
So I'll admit, I don't know enough about the proper context of marijuana to know when it would be a quote-unquote good thing.
And that is why I decided to do this episode, man, because so many people out there, I was the same way. I thought, hey, you know what? No big deal, man. Hey, there's probably a dosage to marijuana. You could probably dose it, you know. You could probably take a little bit, be all right. It's probably good for some people. You can, you know, some people it might be good for pain. Some people it might be good for cancer. It might be good for this. It might be good for that. Hell no. Hell no. And there's just not enough education from a spiritually literate standpoint. There's not enough people talking about the dangers of this and what the literal father of modern Satanism taught about this topic. And so Ben Shapiro gives such a poor defense of the faith, but not just in front of anybody, in front of one of the biggest audiences in the entire internet and podcasting world. And truly, this is why the West, this is why our societies are in so much trouble. Now, I will give Ben credit where credit is due. I like what he had to say. Like, hey, I keep kosher. Just because God made something doesn't mean you should eat it. I don't eat pigs. Good on him. Like, that's great. That was really well said. But I guess he just wasn't ready. He just didn't know. He did not investigate what Ephesians 5:11 had to say, okay? Have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather expose them. What an opportunity to expose, right? That's why I encourage you to share this episode, share this podcast with people, because I will be covering things that you're not going to find anywhere else, ever, probably. I'm not trying to be all proud and boastful. It's just God's brought me through some very unique situations to be able to deliver the goods. Ephesians 6:10, finally, my brethren, be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. Put on the whole armor of God that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil, the trickery of the devil. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in the heavenly places. Therefore, take up the whole armor of God that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand. Stand, my friend. Whew. Joe Rogan does not realize that he is being used as a vessel of the rulers of darkness and the principalities and the powers of this age. His podcast, the way he talks about psychedelic drugs, the way he promotes the use, the experimentation, the experience, the literal, that the Joe Rogan experience is literally him with the all-seeing eye in the middle of his head, like his logo for his podcast. I know I'm picking on Joe Rogan, by the way. Everybody in the media, like pop culture, they're all about drugs, but I'm picking on Joe a little bit here because he's so influential, and I've had so many people over the years listening to his stuff, and they're all super druggy. I even know one guy that's had a bad trip on mushrooms, and he almost killed himself. Because you're playing with fire when you're playing with drugs, man. People are playing with fire, and they don't know what the hell they're doing. And here's my take. Well, how come, you might be wondering, well, how come somebody like Joe Rogan doesn't commit suicide? And here's what I'll say. I think when demons enter a person, when people are demonically being used, when they're inhabited, I think some people are used as a vessel for evangelism, like Joe Rogan is, and I think some people are just marked for destruction. I think some people, the enemy just wants to use and abuse, have some fun with. And I mean, I hate to, it sounds pretty harsh, but from all my observations, that's kind of what I think is going on here. It's just a big game of souls and how many people they can deceive, how many people they can kill for fun. And there's a lot of victims out there, and there's also evangelists. I have met witches in person before, and they are evangelists. The spirits use them to attract and bring in more people to the world of sorcery, of pharmakia, of drug use, okay? And so here's what I'll say, wrapping kind of up this whole talk. This podcast is for the wise of Daniel chapters 11 and 12. You understand the 70 Shabuah. You understand the timeline of God. And there's some specific things we're told about Matthew 24 that we're supposed to be paying attention to like crazy right now. We're supposed to be focusing like a laser beam on this stuff. And one of those things is Matthew 24. That this is like the chapter right now that like this is so relevant to our lives. It's so relevant. And Matthew 24:48 says, "But if that evil servant says in his heart, 'My master is delaying his coming,' and begins to beat his fellow servants and to eat and drink with the drunkards, the master of that servant will come on a day when he is not looking for him, and at an hour that he is not aware of, and will cut him in two and appoint him his portion with the hypocrites. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth." So eating and drinking with the drunkards. You know what else we can throw in there? And it's the same spirit, it's the same essence and meaning in the text. Doing drugs with the psychedelic crowd. Doing drugs with those who are obsessed with hallucinogenics. Doing drugs to pass the time, losing control of your body like a drunkard. Okay? The master, Yeshua, is looking for a spotless bride right now, a bride that's ready for his coming, for his return. He's looking for people who are sober. I'm sorry, man, if you're hooked on weed, you're in trouble right now. If you're hooked on any substance that you know, you don't need me to tell you, the Holy Spirit's teaching you that it's something that is not edifying, it is dragging you down, it is causing you to be tormented, oppressed, have night terrors, have dreams and visions of death and hell and evil. If you know that you're being followed by demons, if you know your dwelling is haunted, if you have any perception, if you have scratches on your body, if you have something that's whispering things in your ear and it's not going away, it stays around you, you are totally not obeying what this verse is saying in Matthew 24:49. If you're taking drugs that are opening you up to this type of oppression, you must make yourself spotless. So here's what I'll do. For this episode, I have done something extremely special. I have put together a PDF. Okay? Instructions to cleanse your dwelling step by step. Okay? So I'm going to make this available. It's in the description right now of this video and of this podcast episode. You can also join my group on my Telegram. Join the group so that I can also talk with you if you need extra help, instructions, if you want somebody. And there's a lot of people in there, by the way, not just me, praying. Download the PDF, though. There's going to be instructions to cleanse your dwelling, okay? Let's go ahead. I'm going to exit this, and let's just go and take a look at it. Here I have instructions. Give a little backstory. I give you scriptures. I give you guidelines, specific steps, and I teach you something that a lot of people don't talk about, man. Where should we be praying that these demons go? I pray that they go into the abyss. Get them the hell out of your life. And I show you what the abyss is. I show you how, like, the prayer that I've used so many times that's been so powerful in my life. I show you all these things and more. You can grab that, go ahead and download it totally for free. Join the group, and I'd love to pray for you. I'd love to experience God with you, just the way that I experience God. He's ready. He's knocking. So many people are going to be blessed by obedience, not just in the head knowledge of understanding certain things in the scriptures, but actually taking like these instructions that I put together, following them, letting the Holy Spirit teach you, but following these instructions that are totally based on scripture and watching God work in your life. Man, there's something about applied scripture, faith and works, action. There's something about that is so powerful. You're about to witness it if you haven't witnessed it before in your life. And yeah, I'm a little more on the charismatic side, man. Like, I've been through enough. I'm a very charismatic guy, if you want to call it that. I have charisma when it comes to this topic because I want to see God's people set free from demonic slavery. Okay? There's a couple things in life that are very sure. Death and taxes, right? We're slaves to the IRS. We're slaves to whatever, regulatory body that collects taxes in your country might be. But you know what? You don't have to be a slave to the demonic and the spiritual oppression. You don't have to be a slave. So I in the name of Yeshua, rise up and be set free right now. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Overcome Babylon. I hope you've learned, and hopefully this has been an eye-opener for you. This was a tremendous eye-opener for me when I started connecting all the dots. And stay tuned, more episodes on the way. Be blessed, and I will catch you next time. I hope you've been blessed by today's episode. If you could give me a like, drop a comment, share this content, or give me a 5-star rating, that would be great. And it would allow more people to hear this message. Whether you're watching on video sites like Rumble, BitChute, Brighteon, or listening in on the podcast, I'd love to know your thoughts and feedback. Also, make sure to visit overcomebabylon.com for more articles, reports, and other great info that I don't always have time to cover here in the podcast. All right, that's all I have for now. I'll see you next time.